The morning mist hung low over the cobblestones of Buckingham Palace as Sergeant James Mitchell adjusted his red tunic for what would be the most significant day of his 20-year career as a member of the Queen's Guard. The ancient stones beneath his polished boots had witnessed centuries of royal drama, but nothing quite like what was about to unfold on this crisp October morning. James had always been different from his fellow guardsmen. While others maintained the traditional stoic silence that had defined the Queen's Guard for generations, James possessed an unusual quality that set him apart, an almost supernatural ability to remain calm under the most extraordinary circumstances. His colleagues often joked that he could maintain his composure even if the palace walls came tumbling down around him. The palace was buzzing with unusual activity that morning. Queen Camilla had arrived earlier than expected, and her mood was reportedly less than pleasant. The household staff whispered in hushed tones about a series of unfortunate events that had occurred over the weekend. A private family gathering had gone terribly wrong, with heated arguments and accusations flying between various members of the royal family. The details were scarce, but the tension was palpable throughout the palace corridors. James took his position at the main entrance, his bearskin hat perfectly positioned, his rifle held at the regulation angle. He had performed this ritual thousands of times, but today felt different. The very air seemed charged with an electric anticipation, as if the palace itself was holding its breath for something momentous to occur. Queen Camilla emerged from the palace at precisely 10 o'clock, her face a mask of barely controlled fury. She was dressed in an elegant navy blue coat, but her usual grace seemed forced, her movements sharp and deliberate. The small entourage of advisors trailing behind her exchanged nervous glances, clearly uncomfortable with their sovereign's mood. As she approached the main gate, Queen Camilla suddenly stopped and turned toward James. Her eyes, normally warm and engaging during public appearances, now blazed with an intensity that made even the most experienced palace staff step back involuntarily. The morning silence was broken only by the distant sound of London traffic and the soft rustle of autumn leaves in the palace gardens. "Sergeant Mitchell," she said, her voice carrying across the courtyard with unexpected force. Several tourists who had gathered outside the palace gates turned their heads, sensing that something unusual was about to happen. The royal protection officers positioned themselves strategically, their hands moving almost imperceptibly toward their concealed weapons. James maintained his position, his eyes fixed straight ahead as protocol demanded. Years of training had prepared him for many scenarios, but nothing had quite prepared him for the raw emotion he could sense emanating from the queen consort. The traditional relationship between the monarchy and the Guard was built on centuries of unquestioned loyalty and absolute obedience. Guards were expected to follow orders without question, regardless of personal feelings or circumstances. "I want you to leave your post immediately and escort a certain individual from the palace grounds," Queen Camilla continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "There is someone here who has overstayed their welcome, and I want them removed from my sight permanently." The request was highly unusual. Royal guards were not typically used for such purposes, and the protocol for removing individuals from palace grounds was well established through proper security channels. James could feel the weight of dozens of eyes upon him: palace staff, security personnel, and even some early morning tourists who had gathered to watch the changing of the guard. What happened next would be discussed in royal circles for years to come. Instead of immediately moving to carry out the Queen's order, James did something that had never been recorded in the long history of the Queen's Guard. He slowly turned his head, a movement that violated every protocol of his position, and looked directly into Queen Camilla's eyes. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the London traffic seemed to quiet as if the entire city was holding its breath. Palace staff froze in their tracks, uncertain whether they were witnessing an act of treason or something else entirely. The royal protection officers tensed, their hands now clearly visible on their weapons, unsure of how to respond to this unprecedented breach of protocol. James' voice, when he finally spoke, was calm and measured, carrying none of the deference typically expected when addressing royalty. "Your Majesty," he said, his words carefully chosen and delivered with a clarity that surprised everyone present. "I respectfully request to know who you wish me to escort from the premises and the specific reason for their removal." The request was stunning in its audacity. Royal guards simply did not question orders from members of the royal family. The very foundation of their service was built upon unquestioning obedience and absolute loyalty to the crown. To ask for clarification, to demand reasoning, was tantamount to challenging royal authority itself. Queen Camilla's face reddened with fury. Her advisors shuffled nervously, clearly out of their depth in this unprecedented situation. The head of palace security, Sir Robert Whitmore, stepped forward as if to intervene, but something in James' demeanor gave him pause. There was no defiance in the guard's posture, no rebellion in his voice. Instead, there was something else, a quality that defied easy definition. "You dare question my direct order?" Queen Camilla's voice rose, echoing off the palace walls. "I am your queen, and you will do as I command without question or explanation." But James remained unmoved. His 20 years of service had taught him many things about loyalty, duty, and honor. He had served through difficult times, had witnessed family disputes, and political controversies that never made it to the public eye. He had always maintained his silence, always followed orders without question. But something about this moment felt different, felt wrong in a way that challenged his very understanding of what true service meant. "Your Majesty," he continued, his voice maintaining that same supernatural calm, "my oath is to protect and serve the crown with honor and integrity. Before I can carry out your request, I need to understand if this action serves the best interests of the monarchy and the people we are sworn to protect." The gasps from the assembled staff were audible now. Even the tourists outside the gates had fallen silent, sensing that they were witnessing something extraordinary. News crews, alerted by the unusual commotion at the palace, began to arrive, their cameras capturing every moment of this historic confrontation. Queen Camilla's anger reached a crescendo. "How dare you lecture me about the best interests of the monarchy? I know exactly what is best for this family and this institution. Your job is to follow orders, not to think about them." But something remarkable was happening. As Queen Camilla's fury intensified, James' calm seemed to grow stronger, more profound. It was as if he was drawing strength from some deep well of inner peace that remained untouched by the chaos around him. His breathing remained steady, his posture unchanged, his voice consistently measured and respectful. "Your Majesty," he said, "I have served this institution faithfully for 2 decades. I have never once questioned an order or challenged royal authority. But today, I sense that you are acting not from a place of royal wisdom, but from personal pain and anger. My duty is not just to follow orders, but to serve the crown with honor. Sometimes, true service requires difficult conversations." The words hung in the air like a challenge to centuries of royal protocol. Palace staff exchanged incredulous looks, unsure whether they should intervene or simply bear witness to this unprecedented moment. The head of security reached for his radio, then hesitated, uncertain of what authority could possibly resolve this situation. Queen Camilla fell silent, her anger seemingly frozen by the unexpected nature of James' response. For a moment, the mask of royal composure slipped, revealing something raw and vulnerable beneath. The morning sun, breaking through the clouds, cast long shadows across the palace courtyard, creating an almost theatrical backdrop for this extraordinary confrontation. James continued, his voice carrying a warmth that had been absent from royal guard interactions throughout the history of the palace. "Your Majesty, I can see that you are in pain. Whatever has happened, whoever has hurt you, using your position to strike back will only bring dishonor to the crown you represent. The monarchy's strength has always come from rising above personal grievances, from showing grace under pressure." The transformation in the atmosphere was palpable. What had begun as a confrontation between authority and defiance was evolving into something else entirely. A moment of genuine human connection that transcended the rigid hierarchies of royal protocol. Even the assembled staff seemed to sense that they were witnessing something unprecedented in the long history of the British monarchy. Queen Camilla's advisors watched in fascination and terror as their sovereign stood locked in this extraordinary exchange with a simple guardsman. The implications of this moment would ripple through the palace hierarchy for months to come, challenging assumptions about power, authority, and the true meaning of service that had remained unchanged for centuries. The morning air carried the scent of autumn flowers from the palace gardens, a reminder of the natural world that continued its ancient rhythms regardless of human drama. Birds sang in the old oak trees that had witnessed the rise and fall of kings and queens, adding their voices to this historic moment that would forever change the relationship between the monarchy and those sworn to serve it. As the seconds stretched into minutes, it became clear that this was no ordinary confrontation. James Mitchell, a simple soldier who had devoted his life to serving the crown, was teaching the queen consort herself a lesson about the true nature of loyalty, duty, and honor that would reshape their understanding of what it meant to serve the British monarchy. The stage was set for a conversation that would challenge everything both of them believed about power, responsibility, and the delicate balance between personal feelings and public duty. What had started as a simple order to remove an unwanted guest from the palace was becoming a profound examination of the very foundations upon which the modern monarchy rested. The morning sun climbed higher in the sky, bearing witness to a moment that would be remembered in palace circles for generations to come. The day a royal guard's calm response to an angry queen's order changed everything both of them thought they knew about true service to the crown. The tension in the palace courtyard remained thick as honey as Queen Camilla processed James Mitchell's unprecedented words. Her royal advisors stood frozen like statues, their faces reflecting a mixture of horror and fascination at witnessing this extraordinary breach of centuries-old protocol. The morning that had begun with routine ceremony was rapidly transforming into something that would be discussed in royal circles for decades to come. Sir Robert Whitmore, the head of palace security, had served the royal family for over 30 years. He had witnessed political scandals, family crises, and public relations disasters that would have toppled lesser institutions. But never in his extensive career had he seen a member of the Queen's Guard directly challenge royal authority with such calm determination. His hand hovered near his radio, torn between the need to restore order and the growing realization that traditional solutions might not apply to this extraordinary situation. Queen Camilla's breathing had become shallow and rapid, her carefully applied makeup unable to disguise the emotional storm raging beneath her composed exterior. The navy blue coat that had looked so elegant when she first emerged from the palace now seemed to weigh heavily on her shoulders, as if the very fabric had absorbed the burden of her mounting frustration and confusion. James maintained his position with the steadiness of an ancient oak tree, unmoved by the swirling chaos of emotions and protocol violations around him. His 20 years of service had taught him to read people, royalty, and commoners alike, with an accuracy that often surprised his fellow guardsmen. He could see beyond Queen Camilla's anger to the deeper pain that drove it, and something in his soldier's heart recognized a fellow human being in distress. "You speak of pain and personal grievances," Queen Camilla finally managed, her voice regaining some of its regal authority, but carrying an undertone of vulnerability that made several staff members look away in embarrassment. "What could you possibly understand about the burdens I carry, the impossible standards I must meet, the constant scrutiny and judgment I face every moment of every day?" The question hung in the morning air like a challenge. Around the courtyard, palace staff continued their frozen tableau, afraid to move or speak lest they miss a single word of this historic exchange. The distant sound of London awakening, buses rumbling down the mall, early morning joggers in St. James's Park, the first tours of the day beginning their routes, created a strange counterpoint to the intimate drama unfolding within the palace walls. James considered his response carefully. Every instinct born of military training screamed at him to apologize, to return to position, to restore the proper order of things. But something deeper, something that went beyond protocol and uniform and centuries of tradition, compelled him to continue this extraordinary conversation. "Your Majesty," he began, his voice carrying the same measured calm that had characterized his previous responses. "I may be just a soldier, but I am not blind to human suffering. I have seen you at state functions when you thought no one was watching. I have observed the moments when you think you are alone with your thoughts. I have witnessed your kindness to staff members during difficult times, and your genuine concern for people who can do nothing to advance your position or reputation." Queen Camilla's eyes widened slightly at this unexpected insight. Royal guards were supposed to be invisible, silent sentinels who observed nothing beyond potential security threats. The idea that one of them had been watching her closely enough to understand her character, to see beyond the public facade to the woman beneath, was both disturbing and oddly comforting. "I have also seen," James continued, "how you carry yourself when family disputes arise, how you try to maintain dignity while others around you lose their composure. Whatever happened this weekend, whatever words were spoken or actions taken that brought you to this point of anger, I can see that it has wounded you deeply. But using your position to strike back, to order the removal of someone without due process or clear justification, would diminish the very dignity you work so hard to maintain." The words struck Queen Camilla like physical blows. The family gathering that weekend had indeed been a disaster of unprecedented proportions. Long-simmering resentments had erupted into open warfare, with accusations and recriminations flying like arrows across the elegant dining rooms of Windsor Castle. She had been accused of manipulation, of scheming, of not belonging in the royal family, words that cut deeper than any public criticism ever could. Lady Margaret Thornbury, Queen Camilla's private secretary, stepped forward slightly, her face pale with concern. She had served the royal family for 15 years and had never witnessed such a direct challenge to royal authority. Her instinct was to intervene, to restore proper protocol, but something in the quality of the conversation gave her pause. There was no disrespect in the guard's manner, no hint of rebellion or insubordination. Instead, there was something that felt almost like counsel, like the guidance a trusted advisor might offer in private. "The person I want removed," Queen Camilla said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "said things to me that no human being should ever have to hear. They question my right to be here, my worth as a member of this family, my very existence in this role. They made it clear that they consider me an interloper, a pretender to a throne I have no right to occupy." The pain in her voice was unmistakable now, cutting through the morning air like a blade. Several staff members found themselves blinking back tears at hearing their sovereign express such raw vulnerability. The image of the composed, dignified queen consort was cracking like old paint, revealing the wounded woman beneath. James felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. This was no longer about protocol or proper procedure. This was about human dignity, about the fundamental respect that every person deserved regardless of their position or title. His response would either heal or further wound someone who was clearly struggling with profound emotional pain. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice gaining warmth and strength, "I cannot speak to the specific words that were said or the circumstances that led to them. But I can tell you what I have observed during my years of service. You have earned your place in this family not through birth or inheritance, but through dedication, grace, and genuine care for the people you serve. You have transformed yourself from a private citizen into a working member of the royal family, taking on responsibilities and burdens that few could handle with such dignity." Queen Camilla's composure began to crack visibly. Tears gathered in her eyes, threatening to spill over and complete the destruction of her carefully maintained public image. The morning sun, climbing higher in the sky, cast long shadows across the courtyard, creating dramatic patterns of light and dark that seemed to mirror the emotional landscape of this extraordinary moment. "You don't understand," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. "They said I was a mistake, that Charles should have never married me, that I am a stain on the institution they have spent their lives serving. How do I respond to that? How do I maintain dignity when my very existence is being questioned by people who are supposed to be family?" The revelation hit the assembled staff like a thunderclap. Family disputes were nothing new in royal circles, but hearing Queen Camilla express such profound hurt and vulnerability was unprecedented. Several advisors exchanged glances, clearly wondering how this information would be contained and what the long-term implications might be for the monarchy's public image. James took a step forward, a movement that under normal circumstances would have triggered immediate intervention from security personnel. But something in his demeanor, the obvious respect and genuine concern in his posture, kept them at bay. His years of military service had taught him about leadership, about the difference between commanding through fear and inspiring through example. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice carrying a strength that seemed to fill the entire courtyard. "Respectfully, your worth is not determined by the opinions of others, regardless of their position or relationship to you. Your value comes from your actions, your character, and your commitment to service. I have watched you comfort grieving families at state funerals. I have seen you champion causes that others ignore. I have witnessed your genuine kindness to people who can offer you nothing in return." The tears that had been threatening to fall finally spilled over, leaving tracks down Queen Camilla's carefully powdered cheeks. But, rather than weakness, there was something almost liberating about this display of genuine emotion. The rigid mask of royal composure was finally slipping away, revealing the human being who had been hidden beneath layers of protocol and expectation. "You speak as if you know me," she said through her tears, "but you are just a guard. How can you possibly understand what it feels like to live under constant scrutiny, to have every word and gesture analyzed and criticized, to know that half the country wishes you had never been born?" James' response came without hesitation, born from depths of experience that went far beyond his role as a royal guard. Your Majesty, I may wear a uniform that makes me seem invisible to most people, but that invisibility has given me a unique perspective. I have watched you when you think no one is looking. I have seen you cry alone in the rose garden after difficult public appearances. I have witnessed your genuine grief at state funerals and your authentic joy at celebratory events. I have observed your interactions with staff members when there are no cameras present and no public relations benefits to be gained. The courtyard had fallen into complete silence except for the soft sounds of Queen Camilla's quiet sobbing and the distant hum of London traffic. Even the birds seemed to have paused their morning songs in deference to this extraordinary moment of human connection that was unfolding before them. What you saw this weekend, James continued gently, was not a reflection of your worth or your right to be here. It was a reflection of other people's pain, their own insecurities and fears about change and tradition. When people attack others with such viciousness, they are usually trying to protect something in themselves that they fear is being threatened. Queen Camilla looked up at him through her tears, seeing perhaps for the first time not just a uniformed guard but a human being with wisdom and insight that transcended his official role. The revelation was as shocking as it was comforting, that someone had been watching over her not just as a security measure, but as a fellow human being who recognized her struggles and valued her worth. The morning continued its progression toward full daylight, but time seemed suspended in the palace courtyard as sovereign and subject found themselves connected by bonds of mutual respect and understanding that transcended every protocol and tradition that had previously defined their relationship. What had begun as a moment of royal anger was transforming into something entirely unprecedented. A genuine conversation between two human beings who had found common ground in the shared experience of serving something larger than themselves. The transformation in Queen Camilla's demeanor was visible to everyone present in the palace courtyard. What had begun as imperial fury was gradually giving way to something far more complex and human. Her tears had stopped flowing, but the vulnerability remained, creating an atmosphere of unprecedented intimacy between monarch and servant that defied every established protocol of royal interaction. James Mitchell could see the internal struggle playing out across Queen Camilla's face as she grappled with emotions that her position had trained her to suppress. 20 years of military service had taught him to recognize the moments when a person's entire worldview shifted, when long-held assumptions crumbled, and new understanding took their place. He sensed that Queen Camilla was experiencing exactly such a moment. The palace staff continued their frozen tableau, afraid to move or speak lest they disturb this extraordinary exchange. Lady Margaret Thornberry found herself taking notes in her mind, knowing that this conversation would require careful documentation and consideration. The implications for royal protocol alone were staggering. How does one record an interaction where established hierarchies had been temporarily suspended in favor of genuine human connection? You mentioned watching me when I thought no one was looking, Queen Camilla said finally, her voice regaining some of its strength, but retaining a new quality of openness. That should disturb me, the idea that my private moments are being observed and analyzed. But, instead, I find it oddly comforting to know that someone has been witness to the person I am when the cameras are off and the crowds are gone. James nodded slightly, a gesture that under normal circumstances would have been considered inappropriate for a guard addressing royalty. But the normal rules seemed to have been suspended, replaced by something far more fundamental and honest. Your Majesty, true character is revealed not in public performances, but in private moments. What I have observed is a woman of genuine compassion who struggles daily with the weight of expectations and the burden of representing an institution that is both beloved and criticized. The morning sun was climbing higher, casting new patterns of light and shadow across the ancient stones of the palace courtyard. The tourists who had gathered outside the gates had grown into a considerable crowd, drawn by the unusual activity and the presence of news crews who had arrived to document this unprecedented event. Social media was already buzzing with speculation about the extended conversation between Queen Camilla and one of her guards. Sir Robert Whitmore, the head of palace security, found himself facing a situation for which no training manual had prepared him. His instincts screamed that protocol was being violated in every possible way, but his deeper judgment recognized that something important was happening, something that transcended normal security concerns. His decision to allow the conversation to continue would later be seen as one of the most significant judgment calls in modern royal history. "The person you want me to remove," James continued carefully, "whoever they are and whatever they said, they have succeeded in making you doubt yourself. They have planted seeds of insecurity that are now growing in the fertile ground of your own fears. But, Your Majesty, those seeds can only grow if you water them with your attention and belief." Queen Camilla's eyes sharpened with interest. The philosophical nature of James' observation was unexpected from someone she had previously seen only as a silent sentinel. "You speak like someone who has given considerable thought to human nature and the dynamics of power. That seems unusual for a palace guard." James smiled slightly, the first break in his formal composure since the conversation had begun. "Your Majesty, the military teaches many lessons that extend far beyond combat and ceremony. Leadership, honor, the protection of others. These require deep understanding of human motivation and behavior. I have seen how power can corrupt and how it can elevate. I have witnessed both cowardice and courage from people in positions of authority." The admission revealed layers of experience and insight that surprised everyone present. Palace guards were selected for their physical capabilities and unwavering loyalty, not necessarily for their philosophical depth. Yet here was evidence that James Mitchell possessed a wisdom that went far beyond his official duties. "Tell me," Queen Camilla said, her voice gaining strength and curiosity. "In your observation of people in power, what have you learned about the difference between those who use their position wisely and those who abuse it?" The question transformed the dynamic of their conversation from personal counseling to something approaching a philosophical discussion between equals. The assembled staff exchanged glances, recognizing that they were witnessing something unprecedented in the history of Royal Guard interactions. James considered his response carefully, understanding that his words would likely be remembered and repeated for years to come. "Your Majesty, true leaders understand that power is not something to be hoarded or wielded carelessly. It is a tool to be used in service of others, a responsibility that requires constant self-examination and humility. The moment someone begins to use their position to settle personal scores or to elevate themselves above accountability, they have betrayed the trust that power represents." Queen Camilla nodded slowly, her expression showing that his words had struck a deep chord. "And what about forgiveness? When someone has wounded you deeply, when they have attacked not just your actions but your very right to exist in a role, how does a person in power respond without either appearing weak or becoming vindictive?" The question revealed the heart of her dilemma. Whatever had happened during that weekend family gathering had clearly involved attacks on her legitimacy and worth that went beyond normal family disagreements. She was struggling with how to respond in a way that maintained her dignity while not compromising her position or her principles. "Your Majesty," James replied, "forgiveness is not about forgetting or pretending that harmful words were never spoken. It is about refusing to allow someone else's pain and insecurity to poison your own heart. True strength comes from responding to cruelty with grace, to attacks with dignity. When you elevate yourself above the level of those who would wound you, you demonstrate the very qualities that make you worthy of the respect they have failed to show." The wisdom in his words was undeniable, cutting through the complexity of royal politics and family dynamics to reach fundamental truths about human nature and leadership. Queen Camilla found herself seeing her situation from an entirely new perspective, understanding that her response to the weekend's attacks would define not just her immediate future, but her legacy as queen consort. "You suggest that I should simply ignore what was said, pretend that it doesn't matter?" she asked. But there was more curiosity than challenge in her voice now. "Not ignore, Your Majesty, but transform. Use the pain as fuel for something greater. Show through your actions that their words were wrong, that you are indeed worthy of the position you hold. Let your grace under fire become the story that is remembered, not their attempts to diminish you." Lady Margaret Thornberry found herself moved by the unexpected eloquence and wisdom of this simple guardsman. His words carried the weight of genuine experience and deep thought, qualities that were often lacking in the calculated advice of professional courtiers and political advisors. She began to understand why Queen Camilla was listening so intently to someone who had no official standing to offer counsel. The crowd outside the palace gates had continued to grow, and news helicopters could now be heard circling overhead. The unprecedented length of this conversation was drawing attention from media outlets around the world. Palace communications staff were frantically trying to decide how to handle the growing public interest in what was clearly becoming a significant news event. You speak of using pain as fuel, Queen Camilla said thoughtfully. But how does one find the strength to transform suffering into something positive? How do you move beyond the immediate desire for vindication or revenge? James' response revealed depths of personal experience that surprised everyone present. Your Majesty, I have lost friends in service to this country. I have seen good people die while corrupt individuals prospered. I have witnessed injustice and cruelty that would break many people's faith in humanity. But I learned that carrying anger and resentment only adds to the world's suffering. True healing comes when you choose to use your pain to understand others who suffer, when you let your wounds become sources of compassion rather than bitterness. The personal revelation added new dimensions to their conversation. Here was a man who had clearly faced his own share of tragedy and injustice, yet had chosen to respond with wisdom and service rather than cynicism or anger. His words carried the authority of someone who had walked through fire and emerged not merely unburned but transformed. Queen Camilla felt something shifting inside her, a loosening of the tight knot of anger and hurt that had been growing since the weekend's confrontation. For the first time since those terrible words had been spoken, she began to see a path forward that didn't involve either surrender or retaliation. "And what of the person I wanted you to remove?" she asked. "How do I face them again knowing what they truly think of me? How do I maintain any relationship with someone who has revealed such contempt?" James' answer came without hesitation. "Your Majesty, sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone who has shown you their worst self is to give them an opportunity to show you their best. People often attack others when they are afraid or insecure. Perhaps this person needs to see your grace and strength more than they need to face your anger." The suggestion was radical in its simplicity and challenging in its implications. Rather than escalation or retaliation, James was proposing a response that would require tremendous strength and emotional maturity. It was exactly the kind of advice that would separate a true leader from someone who merely held a position of power. The morning had progressed toward full daylight, and the palace courtyard was now bathed in golden sunshine that seemed to illuminate not just the ancient stones, but the profound transformation that was taking place between sovereign and subject. What had begun as a moment of royal fury was becoming something that would be remembered as a defining moment in both of their lives. The golden morning light now fully illuminated the palace courtyard, creating an almost ethereal backdrop for what had become one of the most extraordinary conversations in modern royal history. Queen Camilla stood in contemplative silence, processing the unexpected wisdom she had received from Sergeant James Mitchell, a man whose very existence she had barely acknowledged during his 20 years of service. The implications of their exchange were beginning to ripple through the assembled palace staff, like stones thrown into a still pond. Lady Margaret Thornberry found herself reconsidering everything she thought she knew about the relationship between service and wisdom, between position and insight. Here was a simple guardsman who had demonstrated more emotional intelligence and leadership counsel than many of the highly educated advisors who surrounded the royal family. Sir Robert Whitmore remained frozen in his security assessment, torn between his duty to maintain protocol and his growing recognition that something profoundly important was happening. His 3 decades of experience had taught him to identify moments of genuine significance, and every instinct told him that this conversation would be remembered long after the immediate crisis had passed. "You speak of giving people opportunities to show their best selves," Queen Camilla said finally, her voice carrying a new quality of thoughtful consideration. "But what if they refuse that opportunity? What if they interpret grace as weakness and continue their attacks with even greater vigor?" James had anticipated this question, understanding that Queen Camilla's concerns were rooted in practical political reality as much as personal hurt. The royal family operated in a complex environment where signs of weakness could be exploited by critics, and where maintaining dignity required constant vigilance against those who would seek to undermine royal authority. "Your Majesty," he replied, his voice maintaining its characteristic calm while taking on new depths of conviction. "True strength is not demonstrated by the absence of challenges, but by how one responds to them. If someone chooses to interpret your grace as weakness, their misinterpretation reveals their character, not yours. The measure of a leader is not whether they can silence all criticism, but whether they can maintain their principles when faced with unreasonable opposition." The philosophical depth of his response continued to surprise everyone present. Palace guards were not typically selected or trained for their ability to provide counsel on leadership and governance, yet James was demonstrating an understanding of power dynamics that would have impressed political scientists and royal historians. Queen Camilla found herself looking at James with new eyes, seeing not just a uniformed figure whose job was to stand silently at attention, but a human being with valuable insights into the very challenges she faced daily. The realization was both humbling and oddly liberating. That wisdom could come from unexpected sources if one was open to receiving it. The family gathering this weekend. She began hesitantly, then stopped herself. The details of internal royal family disputes were not typically shared with staff members, regardless of the circumstances. Yet something about this conversation had created a space where normal boundaries seemed less relevant than honest communication. James sensed her hesitation and responded with characteristic discretion. Your Majesty, you need not share details that you prefer to keep private. But, if speaking about the situation might help you process it more clearly, please know that my oath of service includes absolute confidentiality regarding anything that might affect the welfare of the royal family. The offer was made without any sense of entitlement or curiosity, simply as an act of service from someone who recognized that sometimes leaders needed a safe space to work through difficult situations. Queen Camilla felt a wave of gratitude wash over her, understanding that she was being offered something rare and precious, the opportunity for completely honest conversation without political calculation or personal agenda. They accused me of manipulating the king, she said quietly, the words coming out in a rush as if speaking them quickly might lessen their sting. They said I had isolated him from his family, that I was using my position to settle old scores and advance my own interests at the expense of royal tradition and family unity. The accusations were devastating not just for their cruelty, but for their strategic targeting of Queen Camilla's deepest insecurities about her role and legitimacy. James could see the pain these words had caused, understanding that they struck at the very foundation of her sense of purpose and worth. Your Majesty, he said gently, may I ask you a direct question about your motivations and actions since becoming queen consort? The request was unprecedented. Palace guards simply did not engage in personal questioning of royalty. Yet something in James' manner suggested that his question would be respectful and purposeful rather than intrusive or inappropriate. Queen Camilla nodded slowly, curious about where this line of inquiry might lead. Have your actions been guided by a desire to serve the institution of monarchy and support His Majesty in his role as king, or have they been motivated by personal ambition and the settling of old grievances? The question cut straight to the heart of the accusations that had been leveled against her. It required honest self-examination rather than defensive justification, demanding that she look beyond her hurt feelings to examine her own motivations with complete honesty. Queen Camilla was quiet for several long moments, her gaze distant as she considered not just her answer, but her actual behavior over the months since the coronation. The assembled staff waited in respectful silence, understanding that they were witnessing a moment of profound introspection from someone whose every action was typically calculated for public consumption. If I am completely honest, she said finally, my primary motivation has been to support my husband and serve the institution he leads. But I would be lying if I said that personal considerations have played no role in my decisions. There have been moments when I have acted from wounded pride or the desire to prove my worth to those who question my legitimacy. The admission was stunning in its honesty and self-awareness. Royal figures rarely engaged in such transparent self-examination, particularly in the presence of staff members. Yet Queen Camilla seemed to recognize that this moment demanded nothing less than complete truthfulness if it was to have any meaningful impact on her situation. James nodded respectfully, his expression showing appreciation for her candor rather than judgment for her admitted imperfections. Your Majesty, the fact that you can recognize and acknowledge mixed motivations demonstrates exactly the kind of self-awareness that separates good leaders from poor ones. No human being is capable of pure motivation all the time. The question is whether you are committed to learning from your mistakes and adjusting your approach when necessary. Lady Margaret Thornberry found herself taking mental notes not just about the conversation itself, but about the profound change she was witnessing in Queen Camilla. The defensive anger that had characterized her demeanor at the beginning of this exchange was being replaced by something far more valuable: genuine introspection and the willingness to examine her own behavior critically. So what would you counsel me to do about the family members who have accused me so harshly? Queen Camilla asked. How do I respond to such attacks without either appearing weak or escalating the conflict further? James' response revealed the depth of his understanding not just about human nature, but about the specific challenges of royal politics and family dynamics. Your Majesty, perhaps the most powerful response would be to invite them to a private conversation where you acknowledge their concerns while also expressing your own commitment to the welfare of the family and the institution. Show them through your words and actions that their accusations, whether fair or unfair, have prompted serious reflection on your part. The suggestion was both practical and profound. Rather than retaliation or defensive justification, James was proposing a response that would demonstrate strength through vulnerability, leadership through humility. It was exactly the kind of approach that could transform conflict into opportunity for growth and understanding. You would have me appear to validate their attacks by taking them seriously? Queen Camilla asked, but her tone suggested genuine curiosity rather than resistance. Your Majesty, taking criticism seriously is not the same as accepting it as valid. It means demonstrating that you are confident enough in your own worth to examine accusations without being destroyed by them. It shows that you value family unity and institutional harmony more than your own ego or the need to be proven right. Queen Camilla felt something fundamental shifting in her understanding of the situation. What had seemed like a crisis requiring immediate and forceful response was beginning to look like an opportunity to demonstrate exactly the qualities that would prove her critics wrong: grace under pressure, wisdom in the face of conflict, and commitment to something larger than personal vindication. The morning sun had reached its full strength, casting sharp shadows and brilliant light across the palace courtyard. The crowd outside the gates had grown to several hundred people, and news crews from around the world were setting up equipment to cover what was clearly becoming a major story. Palace communications staff were frantically developing strategies for managing the public relations implications of this unprecedented public conversation. But inside the courtyard, the external pressures seemed to fade into insignificance compared to the profound personal transformation that was taking place. Queen Camilla was discovering that wisdom could come from unexpected sources, that strength could be found in vulnerability, and that true leadership sometimes required the courage to listen rather than the power to command. Sergeant Mitchell, she said, using his name for the first time during their conversation. I find myself wondering how someone in your position developed such insight into the complexities of leadership and human nature. Your counsel would not be out of place in the most sophisticated political circles. James smiled slightly, recognizing the genuine curiosity and respect in her question. Your Majesty, 20 years of observing human behavior from a position of invisibility provides a unique education. When people don't notice you're there, you see them as they really are rather than as they want to be seen. You learn to distinguish between performance and authenticity, between power and authority, between leadership and mere position. The insight revealed yet another layer to this extraordinary man who had challenged every assumption about the relationship between rank and wisdom, between position and insight. Queen Camilla was beginning to understand that she had spent years surrounded by advisors whose counsel, however well-intentioned, was filtered through their own ambitions and political calculations. James offered something far more rare: perspective unclouded by personal agenda or professional advancement. As the morning progressed toward noon, the extraordinary conversation between Queen Camilla and Sergeant James Mitchell was drawing to a natural conclusion, but its impact would reverberate through the palace corridors and beyond for years to come. The assembled staff, news crews, and growing crowd of onlookers had witnessed something unprecedented in the modern history of the British monarchy: a genuine human connection that transcended every established protocol and hierarchy. Queen Camilla found herself looking at the palace, her home and workplace, with completely new eyes. The ancient stones that had witnessed centuries of royal drama suddenly seemed less imposing and more welcoming, as if the building itself had been transformed by this moment of authentic communication. The weight of tradition and expectation that typically pressed down on her shoulders felt lighter somehow, replaced by a new understanding of what true service to the crown could mean. Sergeant Mitchell, she said, her voice carrying a warmth and respect that would have been unimaginable an hour earlier. You have given me something today that no advisor, no family member, no friend has been able to provide. You have helped me see myself and my situation with clarity that cuts through all the political noise and personal emotion that usually clouds my judgment. James maintained his respectful posture, but something in his eyes showed that he understood the profound significance of what had transpired between them. 20 years of silent service had culminated in this moment of genuine connection and meaningful counsel that would change both of their lives forever. "Your Majesty," he replied, "it has been my honor to serve you not just as a guard but as someone who recognizes your worth and your commitment to excellence. What I have seen in our conversation today is exactly the kind of wisdom and grace that makes you worthy of the respect that others have failed to show." Lady Margaret Thornberry stepped forward slightly, recognizing that practical matters would soon need to be addressed. The media attention was growing by the minute, and palace communications would need to develop a strategy for explaining this unprecedented public exchange. But she also understood that something historically significant had occurred that would require careful documentation and consideration. "Your Majesty," she said respectfully, "when you are ready, we should perhaps consider how to address the public interest in today's conversation and what message you would like to convey about this interaction." Queen Camilla nodded thoughtfully, but her attention remained focused on James and the profound shift in perspective he had helped her achieve. "What I would like to convey," she said clearly enough for everyone present to hear, "is that wisdom and valuable counsel can come from unexpected sources when we are humble enough to listen. Today I have been reminded that true service means being open to learning from anyone who can help us become better leaders and better human beings." The statement was both a public acknowledgement of what had occurred and a subtle rebuke to those who might dismiss James' insights based on his position or rank. Queen Camilla was making it clear that she valued substance over status, wisdom over credentials. Sir Robert Whitmore approached cautiously, understanding that his role required him to address practical security considerations while respecting the profound nature of what had just transpired. "Your Majesty, Sergeant Mitchell will need to return to his duties, but I believe this conversation has raised important questions about how we structure interactions between the royal family and the staff who serve them." Queen Camilla turned to James one final time, her expression showing genuine gratitude and newfound respect. "Sergeant Mitchell, before you return to your post, I want you to know that what happened here today will not be forgotten. Your courage in challenging my initial order, your wisdom in helping me see beyond my immediate anger, and your respect in maintaining dignity throughout this entire exchange have exemplified the very best qualities of service to the crown." James felt a deep sense of fulfillment that went far beyond anything his military training or royal service had previously provided. He had not simply followed orders or maintained protocol. He had genuinely served his sovereign by helping her become a better leader and a stronger person. This was what true service looked like when it transcended mere duty to become genuine care for the welfare of those being served. "Your Majesty," he said, "it has been my privilege to serve you in this way. I hope that what we have shared today will help you move forward with the confidence and grace that your position demands and that your character deserves." The crowd outside the palace gates had grown to unprecedented size, and news helicopters circled overhead like mechanical vultures drawn to the scent of a major story. Social media was exploding with speculation about the nature of the extended conversation between Queen Camilla and one of her guards. Royal watchers around the world were analyzing every gesture and expression captured by the long-range cameras of the press corps. But inside the palace courtyard, the external noise seemed to fade into insignificance compared to the profound transformation that had taken place. Queen Camilla had discovered that strength could be found in vulnerability, that wisdom could emerge from conflict, and that true leadership sometimes required the courage to be challenged by those who served under her command. As James prepared to return to his post, Queen Camilla made a decision that would further cement the historic nature of this day. "Sergeant Mitchell," she said, her voice carrying the authority of royal command but tempered with genuine warmth, "I am directing that a full account of our conversation today be preserved in the palace archives. Future generations should understand that the monarchy's strength has always come from its ability to learn and grow, even from the most unexpected sources." The directive ensured that this extraordinary exchange would become part of the official historical record, a testament to the power of honest communication and mutual respect to transcend established hierarchies and create genuine understanding between people of vastly different positions and backgrounds. James saluted respectfully, his gesture carrying new meaning now that it represented not just military protocol, but genuine mutual respect between two people who had found common ground in their shared commitment to service and excellence. As he returned to his position at the palace entrance, his bearing reflected a quiet satisfaction that came from having served his sovereign in the truest and most meaningful way possible. Queen Camilla remained in the courtyard for several more minutes, processing the profound shift in her understanding that had occurred during their conversation. The family crisis that had seemed so devastating an hour earlier now appeared manageable, even potentially beneficial if it provided an opportunity to demonstrate the very qualities James had helped her rediscover within herself. When she finally turned to re-enter the palace, her bearing reflected a new confidence and clarity of purpose. The anger and hurt that had driven her to seek petty retaliation had been replaced by something far more powerful, a renewed commitment to serving the crown with dignity and grace, regardless of the challenges or criticisms she might face. Lady Margaret Thornberry accompanied Queen Camilla back into the palace, already formulating plans for how to manage the inevitable media coverage and public discussion of the day's events. But she also understood that she had witnessed something that would influence how the royal household operated for years to come, a demonstration that wisdom and valuable counsel could indeed come from any source when approached with humility and genuine openness to learning. The palace communications team worked frantically to develop talking points and strategies for addressing the growing media attention, but they also recognized that the story itself was largely positive. Rather than a crisis to be managed, they had a narrative that demonstrated the monarchy's ability to evolve and grow, to learn from unexpected sources, and respond to challenges with grace and wisdom. As news of the extraordinary conversation spread throughout the palace and beyond, staff members found themselves viewing their own roles and relationships with the royal family in new ways. The rigid hierarchies that had traditionally defined palace life seemed less fixed, more permeable to genuine human connection and mutual respect. The family members who had attacked Queen Camilla so viciously during the weekend gathering would soon learn of the day's events through news reports and palace communications. Their accusations of manipulation and self-service would ring hollow in light of her demonstrated willingness to listen to criticism, examine her own motivations, and respond to conflict with grace rather than retaliation. In the days and weeks that followed, Queen Camilla's approach to her royal duties reflected the insights she had gained from her conversation with James Mitchell. Her interactions with staff became warmer and more genuine. Her public appearances showed increased confidence and authenticity, and her response to criticism demonstrated the kind of gracious strength that silenced her harshest critics. Sergeant James Mitchell returned to his duties as a member of the Queen's Guard, but his role had been fundamentally transformed. While he maintained the same professional standards and protocols that had defined his service for 20 years, there was now an additional dimension to his work, the knowledge that he had genuinely served his sovereign in the most meaningful way possible. The story of their extraordinary conversation would be told and retold in palace circles, becoming part of the institutional memory that would guide future interactions between the royal family and those who served them. It would stand as a testament to the power of honest communication, mutual respect, and the courage to challenge established patterns when genuine service demanded it. Years later, historians would mark this day as a turning point in Queen Camilla's reign as queen consort, the moment when she discovered her authentic voice as a leader and learned to transform challenge into opportunity for growth. And they would note with appreciation the role played by a simple guardsman whose wisdom and courage helped shape the modern monarchy's understanding of what true service really means. The ancient stones of Buckingham Palace had witnessed yet another chapter in the long story of the British monarchy, but this chapter was different. Instead of political intrigue or family drama, it told the story of human connection transcending protocol, of wisdom emerging from unexpected sources, and of an institution's ability to grow and evolve through the genuine care and service of those committed to its highest ideals. The sun reached its zenith over London, casting the palace in brilliant golden light that seemed to celebrate this extraordinary day when a royal guard's calm response to an angry queen's order had indeed stunned Buckingham Palace, not through defiance or disrespect, but through the demonstration of what true service to the crown could achieve when guided by wisdom, courage, and genuine care for the welfare of those being served.